Cool. Hey guys, how you doing? This is Phil, Angler to Angler. Sorry I haven't had any videos in the last couple weeks here. I've been kind of busy doing things. We had water temperature change here again, dropped down pretty good and kind of killed it for a minute. I do have one video I have that I will put out maybe in about a month or so. I'm still working on it. It's actually a really good one just before that water got cold. Had a really good calico bite with my buddy Bryce. I'm definitely going to be putting that up. I'm just trying to get that all straightened up because that's going to be a good one. But today, since I'm not fishing, I had some time to go through and talk to you guys about the fishing with tides. For like Newport Harbor, any of the harbors in Southern California, they can be very beneficial to know how to read a tide chart, what to look for, and what times will optimize your fishing. I've mentioned in a few of my videos that I like the tide moving, and I'm going to explain that a little bit more in depth, what to look for, and how to read a tide chart. Because if you know how to do that, that will definitely give you a heads up on what you can do and how to plan your trip or your day, best time to get out there. Because a lot of people, they talk about going out early in the morning or late at night or in the evening, which are low light hours. Great, totally good. But you can actually have some really great days in the middle of the day. If you have some good tide changes, it'll be, just as good as fishing those low light periods. So that's just something to look for. I'm going to explain that a little more in depth. So that's going to be today's episode. So stick around and I'll go through this with you the best I can, see if I can explain it. All right, here we go. So some of the important things about the tides, how they can improve your fishing is that, number one, it definitely puts the fish in a feeding mood, especially in the harbors, because you got water moving in and out of the harbor during these tide changes. It actually stirs up food, gets stuff moving, pulls, exposes clams on the bottom, just kind of stirs up the whole food chain. So those fish are really dialed into that moving water. So when that water is moving like that, they're in feeding mode. They know that that's time to eat because food's getting washed in and out of the harbor or getting stirred up. So that's one of the main reasons I like to fish it when the tide's moving, because that is all happening. The fish are in that feeding mode. One thing to remember is that 9 times out of 10, those fish are going to be facing into the current, watching that food get washed by them. So that's one important thing to remember when you're fishing. Always try to fish with the tide coming with me. So, for example, I'm going to do this on this board here so you can kind of see, hopefully you can understand. So, say right here, say we're in the channel, okay? Just bear with me here. So the current is, say, coming in this way, okay? So it's coming in from the ocean into the harbor. So these fish are actually, I'm going to just do them real generic here, are facing into the current. So what you want to do is the lure should be presented going this direction. So say you're in your boat right here, right? There's a boat. You want to cast this way. Lure hits, and then reel it back towards you so that it's coming towards the fish. To them, that's very natural because that's that bait getting moved, and they're looking forward. They can intercept it. They see it coming. If you come from the back of them this way, you're fishing the opposite way. It's actually coming from behind them and going past them. Not that you can't catch them that way. You can. But it's less natural, and also it doesn't give them as much time to see it, so it's going to actually probably lower your results as far as the bites or hookups that you get. So that's probably one of the most important things about fishing with the tides there. So just kind of keep that in mind. Also, too, when you have those tides, you can actually drift with the boat, use the tide to cover larger areas of the harbor. Sometimes those fish, they move around a lot. You know, I can't tell you how many times there's one day I found a pod of fish and they were in this one area, and that 100 yards was just dynamite. I mean, just fish after fish. So the next day I go to that same spot, same kind of tide movement, just a little bit later, and zero, nothing. Don't think I fished them all out. I'm pretty sure about that. But the fact is, they were actually down about another 400 yards in a different area. And I found them there because was just drifting, trying to find out where they were at. So that's another good thing you can use the tides for, to help you if you have a boat or a kayak or a float tube even. That can be very beneficial. As far as if you're fishing off the shoreline, you're a little bit more of a disadvantage. You can still use that current. You probably want to fish during those times, but obviously you're not drifting. You're just kind of casting out. And you know, I've seen guys use small weights, like split shot weights, the crimp-on weights, and usually a smelt, or something along that line, sardine, and they'll cast it up current and let it drift down with the current past them, and then do it again, and those fish you can do that. You're fishing the same area over and over again, but again, that can be beneficial. Like that time when I was caught that white sea bass in the Back Bay, I was fishing that one area, but it's fan casting, just letting it drift down with the current a little bit, reel it up, throw it out, let the current drag it a little bit more, reel it in, so you can use it for that too. So the tides are important in that aspect. Like I said, the main thing is it gets the fish in the feeding mode, and that's when you're going to get most of your bites. So that's the main reason you really want to pay attention to the tides. And you can get the tides online anywhere. You can just Google it. Tides for Newport Beach, tides for Long Beach, wherever you might be, and it'll give you a tide chart that you can read. I'm going to kind of show you the basic tide chart that appears on most of these websites, or you can just, like I said, if you have a calendar, they have calendars that have them. Various other ways you can, get that information. But I'm going to show you a basic one in the next clip here, okay? Cool. Hey guys. Okay, so what I got here is a basic tide chart. I'm going to just show you, kind of how to read this throughout the day. So when you look at a tide chart, it's going to have a couple things. It's going to have the high tide, the peak high tide, when it's going to be. It's going to have a low tide on the bottom, and then it's going to have another high tide, and then the other low tide. So this is typically for one day. Here in Southern California, our tides run about every 6 hours or so. So it goes from like a low tide to a high tide, and then reversed about every 6 hours, a little bit more than 6 hours. It's not exact, it changes every day a little bit, but generally it's about every 6 hours. So when you want to fish the high tide, the peak high tide is going to be on this chart right here. It is at 5:05 a.m. in the morning, and it's going to say it's going to be 4 foot high. Okay, what that means is that it's going to be 4 feet above sea level, which you see right here. That's sea level. A good way to think of sea level is if we were to distribute all of the water in the oceans around the world here, and it was all level, it would come to the land at one point. That's sea level right there. So that's one way to think of it. So if we have a 4.0 foot high tide, that means that water is going to be 4 feet above sea level. Okay? So as the tide is dropping, our next one we have here is going to be our bottomed out low tide. Okay? So from 5:05 a.m. to 1:15 p.m., it's going to be going down, which means the tide is going to be going out. Okay? So at 1:15 p.m. here, it's a negative 0.02. Okay? That means it's going to be 0.02 below sea level. So it's going from 4 foot high down to a negative 0.02, which means it's dropping about a little more than 4 feet from high tide to low tide. Okay? And that's what they call a tidal coefficient. is that drop. So if this was, say, for example, let me just erase this here. Say it wasn't 4 feet. Here's my pen. Say it was 6 feet. The drop from 6 feet to this to 0.2 would be 6 feet, which is more. So it's going to change more drastically. So the higher this differential is between high and low, the more water movement you're going to have. Okay. Sometimes this might be, you know, depending, maybe this is only 3 feet, and then our low tide is going to be, say, 1 foot. Okay, so what that means is that it's only going to change a difference of 2 feet in that same period of time. So that 2 foot of water movement is a lot less than 6 foot of water movement because there's not as much water coming in. So that's one thing to pick out tides to fish. When you have those really high swings, big differentials from high to low or low to high, when they're in that 5 or 6 foot range, that much of a change, you're going to get a lot of water movement in the harbors because that water is coming in from the ocean and it has to get pushed back out. So it's typically draining. So it's going to go through the channels and out the jetty, and those are going to be spots that have a lot of current during these times. So one thing to remember, typically I like to fish the last 2 hours before peak, high tide, or bottomed out low tide. So that means if this is at 5:05 a.m., hypothetically, I would want to be fishing at about 3 o'clock in the morning till 5. Because what happens at 5 o'clock here, when we hit this peak high tide, what happens is the water stops moving for a little bit. It slows down. It hit as high as it's going to go. So what that means is that there's going to be no more water movement. It's like it just stops moving for a while at that point. And I'll tell you what, it can be like a switch. I've seen it where it'll bottom up, the tide quits moving, and all of a sudden that hot bite I was just on is just gone. No fish. Just stops like a light switch. Done. And then once it starts to drop again, maybe another hour or two, it starts to move back out. They start biting again. So the peak high tide is kind of your goal. You want to fish that 2 hours before. And the same goes for low tide at the bottomed out down here. So this was at 1:15 p.m. At about 11:15, we'd want to be out there fishing. Okay, so that would give us this last little section as it's dropping. And that's when I typically, I mean, anytime during that is fine. As long as there's some water movement. But like usually at these peak times, right here, where it stops, the current stops moving, typically I go have lunch or we move to a different spot. You know, that's maybe a little farther away to just kill some time, or just go home, whatever you want to do. But that's what you want to look for on the tide chart is you know when the high tide is and when the low tide is, and look for the differentials to see you know which one you know what days are going to have the most tide movement, because it changes all the time. You know, it's basically based on the gravitational pull of the sun and the moon. They're constantly moving around. The tides they have a way of doing it. I don't know all the dynamics. I don't want to explain because it's probably super boring, but that's what the tide charts are for, because they can predict it. They can tell you how high, what time for years to come. So definitely go look on that. One of the websites that I really like, that I'm a big fan of and gives you a lot of information on fishing, is called Tides for Fishing. Okay, that's Tides, Tides, the number 4, and fishing, okay, .com. And what it is, you can actually put in wherever you're at, and it will give you the tide charts, the Solunar tables, the weather, the wind, the water temperature. It gives you all that information at your fingertips, which is very helpful in you know kind of figuring out what you're going to do if you want to fish, where you want to fish, you know what time you want to fish, all that stuff. So maybe check that out if you want. Take my word for it; it's pretty awesome. It works really great. So that's a little explanation of the tides. If you have any questions, just leave them on the comments, and I'll try to get to them and answer any questions you have on that. hopefully I cleared this up a little bit. It is kind of hard to explain, but once you have these basics, you know how to read that tide chart, it will definitely improve your fishing performance. It will help you catch more fish. Okay, guys, so basically, real quick wrap up of what I was talking about regarding the tide. So, probably the biggest thing you should take from this is to remember to fish with the tide. Fish with it, okay? So, if the tide's coming in from the ocean here, this is our fish, and it's coming in this way, the fish is going to be facing into the current, whichever way that current's. If the tide's going out, if it's coming out this way, tide's going out, well, guess what? The fish is going to be probably facing this way. Okay, so what you want to do is, again, say this is our boat right here, right? Okay, so if the tide's coming in, the boat is going to drift this way. So try to get the boat sideways, or your float tube or kayak, and what you want to do is you want to cast this direction, okay? Because as the boat drifts, it's going to pull your lure this way, which is where the way the fish is facing, okay? So that's probably one of the most things. So say, for example, the tide's coming in, the boat is now, or kayak or float tube, is now drifting this way. We want to cast this direction so that as we drift along, we're pulling the bait with the current right into the front of the fish. They see it coming from a long way away. And you will catch more fish that way, believe it or not. I mean, I can tell you how many more fish I catch doing it that way than going against it. One thing to consider, last but not least here, is that sometimes the tides are very light. You have strong winds. You can't get a really good drift with the boat. Maybe it's going the opposite of the way you want to go. Those days happen. Trust me, they happen a lot. So if we have, say, the wind is coming in this direction this way, and the tide's coming in this way, what's happening is the boat's trying to go in, but the wind's pushing it back out. So now all of a sudden we're at a little bit of a debacle here, because if you aren't really moving, then you can't really, it's hard to fish. But what you want to remember, though, is if you're just stationary and it just so happens, just make sure you always cast into, so that the current will bring the lure in front of the fish. So we would be casting this way if the current was coming in. If it was going out, then we'd fish it the other way. So just remember that's probably the most important thing. Again, if you have any questions, you can leave something in the comments. I'll do my best to try to get to them. I will have some more videos coming up, so hang tight. Some fishing ones. I just got to get some time. It's been a little busy this last couple weeks. So anyways, thanks again for watching. Hope that was helpful, and I'll see you guys in the next video.